twin moons of Lysera hung low in the alien sky, bathing the grand arena in a cold silver light. Thousands of alien eyes glowed from the stands, waiting for the night's entertainment to begin. At the center of the arena stood a single human, Ethan Cross, his boots pressed into the cracked red stone floor, his breath calm and steady. Around him stood 3 tall alien sisters, their glowing armor humming with strange energy, their faces half covered by silver masks. The crowd murmured with amusement. A few laughed loudly. A human? They brought a human to the warrior's trial? Look at him, and he's soft, he's slow. He's weak, another jeered. Ethan didn't reply. He just looked up at the massive energy barriers surrounding the arena and quietly adjusted the wrist module on his arm. The eldest sister, Sarah, stepped forward, her long silver hair moving with the breeze like a living flame. Her voice was firm and proud. "My sisters think you're too weak for us. Human," she said, her golden eyes studying him. Her younger sister, Lyra, laughed coldly. "He looks like he can't even lift a blade." "The third?" Vara smirked. "He'll last 10 seconds. Maybe less." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He had heard the same words on many worlds before. Humans were always underestimated, always seen as fragile, but he had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the sharpest weapon. Sarah circled him slowly, her metallic boots echoing through the arena. "We don't hate your kind," she said, her tone softer, "but we've seen what your species is." "Curious, emotional, fragile," Ethan finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "You see what you want to see, but you don't know what it means to fight when everything is against you." A brief silence fell. Then Sarah smiled faintly and pulled a glowing spear from her back, its tip sparking with blue lightning. She thrust it into the ground between them, the sound shaking the dust into the air. "Then prove them wrong tonight," she said. The crowd roared in excitement as the arena gates opened with a metallic scream. From the shadows beyond, 6 massive beasts emerged, their bodies covered in spiked black armor, eyes burning with yellow fire. Each one was twice the size of Ethan, their breath steaming with heat. The ground shook as they stepped into the light, their claws scraping the stone floor. Ethan looked up at the monsters and muttered, "So that's how it's going to be." Sarah crossed her arms. "Show us, human, what your strength really is," the first beast charged. Roaring so loud the sound echoed across the valley. Ethan waited, unmoving, until the very last second, then rolled to the side and slashed with his short plasma blade. Sparks burst into the air. He'd cut a line across the creature's shoulder, not deep enough to kill, but enough to make it howl. The sisters leaned forward, surprised by his speed. Lyra whispered, "That's faster than I expected." The beast spun and swung its claw at him, but Ethan ducked under it and drove his blade into its throat. With a final roar, it fell to the ground, smoke rising from the wound. The crowd gasped. 1 down, 5 to go. 2 more beasts came at once, snarling, circling, testing him. Ethan backed away slowly, studying their rhythm. He knew he couldn't overpower them, but he didn't need to. He just needed to make them fight each other. As one lunged, Ethan sidestepped again, this time angling his blade so the beast's strike hit its companion instead. The crowd cheered as the 2 monsters collided. Crashing into the arena wall, dust filled the air, and when it cleared, Ethan stood between their broken bodies, chest rising and falling but eyes still sharp. Sarah's lips parted slightly. She hadn't expected this. No rage, no wildness, just calm precision. He wasn't fighting like a brute, he was fighting like a soldier. Every move had purpose, every strike calculated. The last 3 beasts hesitated, growling, uncertain now. Ethan wiped the blood from his cheek and whispered, "Come on then." The next attack came from behind. He ducked, rolled, and grabbed a fallen spear, driving it straight through the beast's neck. The final 2 charged together, and Ethan dove between them, triggering his wrist module. A burst of blinding light exploded outward, a human-made flash bomb. When the light faded, the beasts were staggering. Disoriented, Ethan rose slowly, blade in hand, and finished them both in 3 clean strikes. Silence, absolute silence, then the crowd erupted, the stands shaking with shock and disbelief. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, the blue glow of his weapon fading. He looked up at Sarah, his expression unreadable. She stared back at him, her confident smile gone, her golden eyes wide. For the first time she felt something new, respect, and maybe a little fear. Lyra whispered, He shouldn't be able to do that." Farah shook her head. "He's human, how?" But Sarah said nothing. She only stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the quiet man who had just done the impossible. Ethan looked at her and said softly, "You wanted me to prove you wrong." Was that enough? Sarah didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she reached down, pulled her spear from the ground, and gave a slow nod. The challenge was over. And for the first time in Lysera's history, a human had stood victorious in the warrior's arena. The crowd chanted his name, but Ethan didn't raise his weapon or smile. He just looked up at the stars above the arena and whispered to himself, "They'll never understand. This isn't strength, it's survival." And under the twin moons, Sarah watched him in silence, her heart unsure. Had she just witnessed human courage? Or something far more dangerous than she ever imagined? The arena floor was covered in the ashes of fallen creatures, their black blood still glowing faintly under the twin moons of Lysera. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, breathing hard, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes calm and alert. The crowd was silent. A silence so deep it felt like the stars themselves were watching. No one had ever seen a human survive the trial, let alone win it high above in the royal balcony. The alien queen leaned forward, her silver crown glinting under the blue torches. Her voice echoed softly through the speakers. "A single human defeated the beasts of Lysera. I have not seen such control in centuries." Her words sent ripples through the alien spectators, some in awe, others in disbelief. But the sisters were not silent. Sarah's heart raced. Lyra frowned and Vera clenched her fists. "This doesn't prove anything," Vara snapped. Turning to her sisters, "He fought beasts, not warriors." Lyra nodded, her tone cold. "Maybe he was just lucky. Let's see how he handles real combat." Sarah didn't reply. Her eyes stayed on Ethan, studying every movement he made, every drop of sweat on his brow. She couldn't deny what she saw, strength. Yes, but also something else, something human, something unpredictable down below. Ethan dropped to one knee, touching the cracked ground. His blade was nearly burned out, his arm bleeding from deep cuts. But he smiled faintly as he whispered to himself, "Not bad. For a warm-up." He didn't know that hundreds of eyes were still locked on him, watching with both curiosity and fear. Suddenly, the massive gates at the far end of the arena began to rise again. The ground shook, the lights flickered, and the crowd gasped. Even Sarah's calm expression broke into shock. "No," she whispered. "That's not part of the test." From the darkness behind the gate came a sound, deep, slow breathing, heavy enough to rattle the metal walls. Then two glowing red eyes appeared, followed by a huge armored body. It was a Drathion, an ancient creature banned from combat centuries ago for its uncontrollable rage. The queen rose from her throne, her voice sharp. "Who released that monster?" But before anyone could answer, the Drathion roared and smashed its way into the arena. Its tail struck the wall, sending shards of stone flying into the crowd. Ethan barely dodged, rolling aside as the impact sent shockwaves through the floor. He coughed through the dust and shouted, "You've got to be kidding me!" The creature lunged, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Ethan ran, ducking between fallen pillars, searching for a weak spot. The Drathion's hide was covered in thick, glowing plates. No energy blade could pierce that easily. He needed a plan, and fast, up in the stands. Sarah's fist tightened on the railing. "He'll die," Vara said with a cruel smile. "Even 100 of us couldn't beat that thing." But Sarah shook her head, her eyes still locked on the human. "Wait," she said softly. "He's thinking." "He's not running. Look at his eyes." Ethan sprinted across the arena, grabbing a fallen spear and jamming it into a wall. He then pulled out a small device from his belt, a human signal beacon. Glowing faintly blue, he attached it to the spear and pointed it toward the creature. The Drathion turned, roaring as the beacon flashed brighter. Attracting its rage, Ethan whispered, "Come on, big guy. Take the bait." As the beast charged, Ethan timed his move perfectly. He dived aside just as the Drathion slammed into the spear. The beacon exploded in a burst of human plasma energy, the shockwave throwing both of them back. When the light cleared, half the creature's armor was melted, smoke rising from its body. The crowd erupted into gasps and cheers. Sarah's mouth fell open. No one, not even their generals, had ever harmed a Drathion. But Ethan wasn't finished. He stood slowly, his armor cracked, his hair burned, but his eyes fierce. He ran straight toward the wounded monster, climbing onto its back and stabbing his blade deep into the exposed flesh. The Drathion screamed, spinning wildly, trying to throw him off, but he held on tight. With one last strike, he jammed the blade into its neck where the glowing lines pulsed strongest. The beast shuddered, let out one final roar, and collapsed with a thunderous crash. Dust filled the arena once more, and through the haze, a single, human figure stood tall, his armor torn, his body covered in blood and dust. But still standing, the arena was silent again. Then, slowly, the aliens began to clap. One, then two, then hundreds, until the whole arena echoed with the sound. Even the queen smiled faintly and whispered, "A human who fights like that? Perhaps there's more to their kind than we thought." Lyra and Vera stood frozen, unable to speak. Sarah turned away, hiding the strange flutter in her chest. Something inside her shifted that night. The belief that humans were weak had cracked, she whispered to herself. He's not just fighting. He's surviving for something. Down below, Ethan looked up at the stands, his vision blurry. He could barely hear the cheers, his body screaming with pain, but when he saw Sarah's golden eyes watching him, he managed a tired smile. He raised his hand, not in victory, but in quiet defiance, a message that said, "This is what humanity is." Then, he collapsed to his knees. The medics rushed in, the arena lights dimmed, and the legend of the human challenger began to spread across Lysera. Whispers filled every hall and chamber. The human had survived the trial of beasts. But Sarah knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something that would change her world forever. The twin moons were high when the arena finally emptied. The air still smelled of burned metal and beast blood. But inside the great hall of the Lyseran fortress, 3 alien sisters sat in silence, their glowing armor dim. The echoes of the crowd's cheers still haunted the walls. Cheers for a human. Sarah sat near the window, staring into the endless night sky. Her fingers tapped lightly on the table, her mind replaying every moment of Ethan's battle. Lyra paced behind her, her long white hair swaying like a trail of fire, and Vera, the youngest, most impatient, slammed her hand on the table, her voice sharp. "He shouldn't have lived. No one survives the Drathion. It's impossible." Sarah's calm voice broke the silence. "Yet he did," she said softly, "and he didn't even run." Lyra frowned. "Maybe he's just a fool with luck on his side." Sarah turned her golden eyes toward her. "No, Lyra, you saw it too. Every move he made had purpose. He wasn't lucky. He was prepared." For a long moment, none of them spoke. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the faint hum of alien aircrafts patrolling the city. Finally, Vera muttered, "Prepared or not, he's still human. Weak blood, short life, no natural power. He cannot be one of us." But the words didn't sound as confident as before. Even she, in her heart, could not forget how the human had stood alone, his body broken, but his will unshaken. Meanwhile, far below the fortress, Ethan lay in a medical chamber. Strange blue lights pulsed over his body as alien healing systems tried to repair his wounds. He refused to be put to sleep. "I need to stay awake," he told the medic. "I've slept through enough pain in my life." The medic, an old alien doctor, looked at him curiously. "You humans are strange. You fight until you bleed, then refuse to rest." Ethan gave a tired smile. "That's how we survive." As the machine hummed, his mind drifted, back to Earth, to the dusty camps where humans once fought just to stay alive. He remembered fire in the sky, cities lost, families gone, and he remembered the promise he made to himself. Never again would he run from anything. Even if the universe laughed at him, he'd stand again and again until they stopped laughing. Up in the fortress, the sisters' conversation continued. Lyra finally broke the silence. He fought for his life, yes, but why did he risk everything for a challenge? No reward, no fame, nothing. Sarah looked thoughtful. Because he's human. They fight not to win, but to prove they exist. Vara scoffed. That sounds poetic. Maybe you've fallen for his tricks. But Sarah's voice grew firm. No, I saw something in his eyes, something I've never seen in any of our kind. He wasn't fighting the beasts. He was fighting the idea that he was less. The words hit them like thunder. Lyra looked away, uncertain. Vera crossed her arms and said nothing. But the doubt was already in her heart. They had all mocked him, called him weak, but now none of them could say it again with the same confidence. Later that night, Sarah found herself walking toward the medical wing. Her footsteps echoed softly against the glass floor. She told herself she only wanted to observe his condition, to understand how a human could endure such pain. But deep inside, there was something else, curiosity, and maybe something even deeper that she didn't want to name. Through the transparent walls, she saw him sitting upright, staring at the stars outside. No armor, no weapons. Just a scarred human wrapped in bandages. His eyes looked distant, tired but still burning with quiet fire. Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You should rest," she said, her voice calm. Ethan turned slowly, recognizing her face even without the silver mask. "Can't sleep," he replied. "Your stars are too bright." For the first time, she smiled faintly. "You fought well," she admitted, "better than anyone expected." Ethan chuckled softly. "You mean better than what your sisters bet on?" Her expression softened. "They don't understand you." "And you do?" he asked. Sarah paused, her gaze lingering on him. "Not yet," she said, "but I want to." The room went silent again. For a brief second, it felt like the walls disappeared, just two beings from different worlds staring. Across an impossible distance, Ethan finally looked down, his voice quiet. "You all think strength is about muscle or power, but that's not it. Strength is staying on your feet when everything tries to break you." Sarah's heart beat faster. No alien had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her as an equal. She took a slow breath. "If that's true, then maybe your kind isn't as weak as we believed." Ethan gave a small nod. "We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. But we endure. That's what makes us dangerous." His words lingered in her mind long after she left the room. By the time she returned to her chambers, Lyra and Vara were waiting. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You went to see him," she said flatly. Sarah didn't deny it. "Yes." Vara's tone turned sharp. "You're letting him get into your head. He's a human, Sarah. He doesn't belong in our world." But Sarah looked at them with quiet certainty. Maybe that's what makes him different. He doesn't belong. And yet, he stands like he does. The sisters stared at her, speechless. For the first time in their lives, they couldn't tell who the weak one truly was. The human who bled and fought alone, or the warriors who doubted him from the safety of their palace. Outside, the night sky shimmered with distant storms. And somewhere in the fortress, the human slept at last, unaware that his strength had already started to change more than just hearts. It was beginning to change a whole world. The sun rose behind thick violet clouds. The air crackled with static, and thunder rolled across the horizon of Lysera. It was storm season, when lightning storms raged across the planet like living gods, and in the heart of the capital, a new rumor spread like fire. The human would fight again. Ethan. Cross stood in the training courtyard, his body still sore from the trial of beasts. The sky above flashed with blue lightning, thunder answering like a drum. He had been summoned early that morning, and though no one said the words aloud, he knew what was coming. It wasn't over. Not yet. Sarah arrived with her sisters, their armor glowing faintly in the stormlight. Behind them, a crowd of alien soldiers gathered, whispering among themselves. Lyra's voice was sharp. "He embarrassed us before the queen." "This time he won't," Vera smirked. "Let's see how long a human can last against true warriors." Sarah, however, said nothing, her expression unreadable. She wasn't mocking. She wasn't cruel. She was simply watching, curious, and perhaps uncertain. The queen's voice echoed through the speakers high above the courtyard. "This duel is voluntary. The human has proven his worth, but he must now prove his mastery. The words hung heavy in the stormy air. Ethan looked up and asked, "All three of them?" Sarah replied, "Yes, together. You will face us beneath the storm." A bolt of lightning struck a nearby spire, lighting up their faces. Proud, fierce, otherworldly. Ethan took a slow breath. "Fine," he said. "Let's see what you've got." The queen raised her hand, and the duel began. The sisters spread out. Instantly, their movements so fast they blurred like silver light. Sarah attacked first, her twin blades slashing in a rhythm like lightning. Ethan blocked, barely, the impact sending shockwaves through his arms. Lyra came next, striking from above, her energy whip slicing through the air. Ethan rolled aside, sparks dancing across his armor. Then Vera struck from behind, kicking him hard enough to send him sliding across the stone. The crowd roared as the human hit the ground. Dust rose around him, his breathing heavy, but he didn't stay down. He wiped the blood from his lip and muttered, "So this is what teamwork looks like." Then he smiled, small, confident. "Let's even the odds," he whispered, and tapped. The device on his wrist, the module on his arm, flared to life, projecting a faint energy field around him. It wasn't a shield. It was a lightning conductor, a risky human invention he'd modified himself. Every bolt of lightning that struck near him was drawn closer, feeding his armor with raw energy. The sisters paused, confused by the sudden glow around him. "What is he doing?" Lyra hissed. Sarah's eyes widened. "He's using the storm." Ethan charged forward, this time faster, his strikes sharper, powered by the storm itself. He parried Sarah's blades, ducked under Vara's kick, and caught Lyra's whip mid-swing with a spin. He pulled her off balance and sent her crashing into the wall. Vara lunged in fury, but Ethan sidestepped and used her momentum against her. She fell to one knee, stunned by his precision. For a moment, the crowd forgot to breathe. The human was moving like a force of nature, each motion timed with the thunder above. Lightning flashed again, and for a heartbeat, he seemed almost unreal. Sarah regrouped, her expression no longer mocking and now serious almost. Respectful, she called to her sisters, "Together." The three moved as one, blades and light weaving through the storm like a dance. Ethan met them blow for blow, sparks and rain mixing around them. The storm grew louder, lightning falling like rain. At one point, a bolt struck directly between them, sending waves of energy outward. Everyone watching shielded their eyes, one except Sarah, who saw something she'd never forget. Ethan standing tall in the lightning's glow, weapon lowered, refusing to strike. He could have won. She realized he had the chance instead. He stepped back and said softly through the rain, "I don't fight to destroy you. I fight to be understood." The words cut through the thunder. The sisters froze, their weapons still glowing but their hands shaking slightly. No alien warrior had ever said something like that. Lyra's whip flickered and died. Vera looked away in confusion, and Sarah lowered her blades, her heart pounding. The queen stood from her seat, her voice echoing through the rain. "Enough." The duel was over. Ethan fell to one knee, exhausted, his armor smoking from the lightning. Sarah walked toward him slowly, the rain dripping from her silver hair. She stopped in front of him and extended her hand. He looked up confused, but she said quietly, "You've proven enough." He hesitated for a moment before taking her hand. The touch sent a strange warmth through both of them. When she helped him stand, the crowd began to cheer again, not mockery this time, but all. Lyra and Vera exchanged glances, their faces unreadable for the first time. Their arrogance had cracked. Sarah turned to her sisters and said, "Maybe strength isn't about power. Maybe it's about what you're willing to fight for." Ethan gave a tired laugh. "Now you're starting to sound human," he said, his voice weak but teasing. Sarah smiled, a real one this time, small and genuine. As thunder rolled in the distance, she whispered, "Perhaps that's not such a bad thing." Above them, lightning lit the sky in bright white arcs. The duel that began as mockery had turned into something else entirely. Respect, and maybe even the beginning of trust. The storm slowly faded, leaving behind the scent of rain and the memory of a fight that no one on Lysera would ever forget. And in the quiet after the thunder, Sarah looked at the human who had changed everything and thought, he didn't just fight us, he changed us. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered through the city of Lysera. Rainwater dripped from the high towers, running down glowing walls into the streets below. The smell of wet stone and charged air filled the atmosphere. And in the royal palace, silence hung heavy, the kind that came after something extraordinary. Ethan Cross sat quietly in the healing chamber, his body weak, his thoughts distant. Every muscle ached from the duel. Every breath reminded him of the lightning that had torn through his armor. Yet deep inside he felt something new. Not pride, not victory, but acceptance. For the first time since he'd arrived on this alien world, he was not just the human, he was someone they noticed. Through the transparent walls he could see the alien city glowing in the soft blue dawn. He thought about Earth, the red deserts, the empty cities, the long wars that had broken everything. Humanity had fled its own ruins, searching for a new home, and now somehow he had become the face of that lost world, standing alone before beings who once thought his kind weak. The door to the chamber hissed open. Sarah entered, her armor replaced by a dark robe that shimmered with silver threads. Her usual coldness was gone. Her steps were slower, her gaze softer. Ethan turned his head, giving a tired smile. "You again?" She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I'm stalking you," he chuckled. "Maybe you are." For a moment they both laughed, the sound light, real, not forced. Then Sarah grew quiet, her eyes tracing the scars across his arms. "You could have killed me during the duel," she said softly. "You had the chance." Ethan shrugged. "Killing you wouldn't have proved anything." Sarah tilted her head. "Then why fight at all?" Ethan looked down, his voice low. "Because every time someone calls us weak, they take a piece of what we are. We fight not to win, but to show we're still here, that we still matter." The words struck deep inside her. No alien had ever spoken that way. Not about honor, not about existence, but about survival. She sat beside him, silent for a while, watching the rain slide down the glass. Then she whispered, "You humans, you don't fight for power, do you? You fight for meaning." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, power fades, but meaning, that stays." Just then the chamber lights dimmed, and a voice echoed through the palace speakers. The queen was summoning them. Sarah rose and looked at him. "You should come," Ethan groaned, standing with difficulty. "Am I being rewarded or punished?" She smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." They walked through long corridors lined with floating lights. Guards stood on either side, bowing as Sarah passed, but their eyes lingered on Ethan. Some looked curious, others respectful, and a few even fearful. For word of the storm duel had spread across Lysera. The human who defied lightning and lived. The great throne hall glowed like liquid silver. At the top of the stairs sat the queen, tall, regal, her long crown pulsing faintly with energy. Beside her stood council members, warriors, and nobles, and all watching the human. As Ethan approached, whispers filled the hall. The queen raised her hand and the room fell silent. Her voice was calm but carried power. "Ethan Cross of Earth," she began. "You came to this world uninvited, unwelcomed, and underestimated." She paused, her golden eyes studying him. "Yet you have faced our beasts, our storms and our strongest warriors, and still you stand." Ethan bowed slightly. Unsure how to respond, the queen continued, "Tell me, human, what drives your kind to fight when all logic says you should surrender?" The hall grew quiet, every alien waiting for his answer. Ethan lifted his head, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "When you lose everything, your home, your people, your sky, you learn what truly matters." He looked around, meeting their glowing eyes one by one. "We don't fight because we're fearless. We fight because we're scared of losing hope. We bleed, we fall, we cry, but we get up again, because if we don't, no one else will." For a moment there was only silence. Then the queen smiled, a small rare smile. She rose from her throne and stepped closer. "Your words remind me of something we lost long ago, heart," she said quietly. Turning to the council, she declared, "From this day forth, humanity shall be recognized as an honored ally of Lysera." Gasps filled the hall. Even Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't expected such a decree. Lyra and Vara, standing in the shadows, exchanged looks of disbelief. A human, once mocked as frail, was now declared equal among them. The queen extended her hand, placing a glowing insignia in Ethan's palm, a mark of the royal seal. "Carry this," she said, "and all of Lysera will know that you stand under our protection." Ethan stared at the glowing symbol. Unsure if this was a dream, he bowed deeply. "Thank you." "Your Majesty," as they left the throne room. Sarah walked beside him in silence. Finally, she said, "You realize what you've done, don't you? You've made history today." Ethan smirked. "I didn't plan to. I just wanted to survive." She looked at him and replied softly, "Sometimes survival is the most powerful revolution." Outside, the storm clouds began to part, revealing a soft golden sky. Ethan stopped for a moment, staring upward. For the first time in years, the sunlight didn't feel distant, it felt warm. Alive, hopeful, he whispered to himself. "Maybe this galaxy isn't done with us yet." Sarah turned to him and said quietly, "Neither am I." Their eyes met, human and alien. Two souls from different worlds connected by something far greater than battle. And as the wind carried their laughter through the halls, the Queen watched from above, her expression thoughtful. She knew this was only the beginning, for the arrival of one human had already begun to change the future of Lysera forever. The skies above Lysera turned red, not the soft glow of dawn. This was fire. Burning through clouds like open wounds, sirens screamed across the capital, their echoes bouncing off crystal towers, and from the palace balcony, Ethan Cross watched the horror unfold. Dark ships were descending through the atmosphere, massive, spiked vessels with black engines that screamed like dying stars. He had seen designs like that before years ago on the frontier, the Karzul Empire, conquerors of entire systems, destroyers of worlds, and now, they had come for Lysera below. Alien soldiers ran through the streets, forming defensive lines, activating energy shields, civilians screamed, rushing into underground shelters. Sarah appeared beside Ethan, her silver armor already on, her face grim. "They broke the peace line," she said, her voice steady, but her hands trembling. "They want the Queen, and the planet's core energy." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we don't let them have either." Sarah turned to him. "You're still healing." "I've been healing my whole life," he interrupted. "But people are dying right now." There was no time to argue. Moments later, the palace gates opened. Ethan and Sarah stepped out into chaos. The ground shook as explosions tore through the city. Columns of smoke rose into the alien sky. The once beautiful capital now looked like a nightmare. Broken spires, burning ships, and the screams of war. Ethan grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen guard. Testing the weight, it was heavier than human weapons. But familiar enough, Sarah powered up her twin blades, their energy cores humming like thunder. When she looked at Ethan, she saw something frightening, not fear, but focus. He had the look of someone who'd lived through hell before. The first wave of Karzul soldiers landed near the outer walls, monstrous figures in dark armor. Their glowing eyes soulless, Ethan shouted, "Aim for their joints. Their armor plates are reinforced only on the chest." The alien soldiers hesitated. A human giving them orders? But Sarah's voice cut through the noise. "Do as he says." The defenders obeyed. Their plasma shots hit the Karzul warriors at weak points, knees, shoulders, throats, and for the first time, the invaders faltered. Ethan ran forward, sliding behind cover and firing in precise bursts, each shot clean, efficient. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a survivor who understood the rhythm of chaos. As the battle raged, a thunderous explosion tore through the eastern district. One of the defense towers fell, crashing into the streets below. Lyra's voice came through the comms. "The enemy is breaching Sector 9. "We're losing the shield generators," Sarah cursed. "That's the core's main line. If they take that, the whole city falls." Ethan grabbed a hover bike from a wrecked transport. "Then we stop them before that happens," he said. Sarah mounted behind him, gripping her blades. They sped through burning streets, dodging falling debris and plasma fire. The bike leapt over craters and crashed vehicles, the world a blur of fire and light at Sector 9. The fighting was worse, smoke so thick it turned day into night. Ethan dismounted and sprinted into the chaos, taking down 2 Karzul soldiers with quick controlled shots. Sarah followed, cutting through another wave with elegant fury. But even as they fought, a shadow passed overhead, a massive dropship descending carrying a siege cannon. Ethan looked up and swore under his breath, "If that cannon fires, half the city's gone." He ran to the nearest defense console, pulling out human tools from his belt. Sarah frowned. "You think you can stop it?" "I can reroute their targeting grid," he said, his hands flying across the alien controls. If I can get 30 seconds on, but the Karzul commander landed before he could finish. A towering figure, half machine, half flesh. His voice boomed through a metal mask. So this is the human I've heard about. The one who made the sisters bow. Ethan turned, rifle raised. Yeah, that's me. The commander laughed darkly. Then you'll die first, the two clashed. Ethan fired. But the commander's shield absorbed the blasts. He lunged, striking with a plasma blade. Forcing Ethan back, the human dodged, rolled, and countered with a burst to the leg joint. Sparks flew, the machine stumbled. Sarah leapt in, slicing the commander's arm clean off with one strike. Together they fought, human precision and alien speed. Side by side, the commander fell to his knees, his eyes burning red. You can't stop what's coming, he hissed. The Empire knows of Earth now. Before they could react, he activated his self-destruct core. Ethan grabbed Sarah and threw her behind cover just as the explosion tore through the courtyard. When the smoke cleared, half the district was gone, but the siege cannon lay shattered. Sarah coughed, pushing debris off herself. Ethan! From the rubble a hand rose. His hand, he was burned, bleeding but alive. He smiled weakly. Guess we stopped it. She pulled him to his feet, anger and relief mixing in her eyes. You're insane, she said. Yeah, he replied, but it worked. Overhead, alien ships from Lysera's royal fleet began to appear, answering the Queen's emergency signal. The defenders cheered as reinforcements filled the sky, pushing the invaders back. But the victory came at a price. The city was scarred, thousands lost, and Ethan knew the worst part wasn't over. As the sun began to rise again, turning the smoke golden, Sarah stood beside him. She whispered, You saved us again, human. He shook his head, staring at the wreckage. No, I bought us time. They'll come again. She turned to him, confused. Then what do we do? Ethan looked up at the horizon, eyes hard as iron. We prepare. Because next time it won't just be Lysera thereafter. It'll be Earth too. The wind carried the scent of ash and rain. The world was quiet again, but only for a moment. In the distance, deep beyond the clouds, more shadows were moving, new fleets preparing to strike. And as Sarah looked at the human standing beside her, she realized something she'd never thought before. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was fighting for everyone. The battle for Lysera was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the war itself. The once bright city now lay in ruins, towers broken, streets filled with smoke, and the air thick with the scent of metal and sorrow. Searchlights swept across the wreckage looking for survivors, and somewhere under those shattered spires, buried beneath layers of stone and fire, was Ethan Cross, the human who refused to die. Sarah stood in the ruins, her armor cracked and scorched, her eyes red from exhaustion. She had been searching for hours, ignoring the medics and ignoring her sister's calls. Lyra's voice came through the comms. Trembling, Sarah, it's been too long. He's gone. Sarah froze, her hand tightening around her blade. No, she said softly. He's not gone. Not him. She tore through the rubble, her hands bleeding as she moved stone after stone. Every breath felt like fire, every second heavier than the last around her. The wind carried faint echoes, the voices of soldiers saying the same thing. The human saved us. The human held the line, but Sarah didn't want stories. She wanted him alive. At last, her hand brushed against something, and a faint metallic surface. She pushed harder, and the rubble shifted, revealing a fragment of armor. Her heart leapt. Ethan! She shouted, Can you hear me? No answer then, a weak sound, muffled and broken. You took your time. She froze, tears filling her eyes with renewed strength. She pulled the rest of the debris away until she could see him. Burned, bruised but breathing. Ethan looked up at her with a faint smile. I told you I don't die easy. Sarah knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his face. You fool, she whispered. You saved us and almost killed yourself. He smirked weakly. That's kind of the human way. As medics rushed in, Sarah stayed beside him, refusing to move even as they treated his wounds. Lyra and Vera arrived soon after, both speechless. The sisters who once mocked him now looked at him with awe and guilt. Lyra whispered, He did what none of us could. Vara nodded slowly. He fought like he carried the whole world on his shoulders. Ethan, half-conscious, muttered, That's because I did. They thought he was delirious, but Sarah knew better. He wasn't just fighting for Lysera. He was fighting for something bigger, something unseen. Days passed. The city began to rebuild, the flames replaced by lights, and the people began to sing songs of the human warrior who saved them. But Ethan remained unconscious, his body refusing to wake despite his strong heart. Sarah visited him every night, sitting beside his bed in silence. She would whisper softly, "You told me humans endure, so don't you dare give up now." Then one night, as the twin moons cast pale light through the window, she felt a hand move. Ethan's eyes opened slowly, weak but alive. Sarah gasped and smiled, truly smiled. "Welcome back," she said softly. He blinked, confused. "How long was I out?" "Long enough for everyone to start missing you," she replied. He chuckled, his voice still raspy. "So I became a legend while I was asleep?" Sarah leaned closer. "You became more than that. You became hope." Later that morning, the queen herself came to see him, her royal robes torn and her face marked with the exhaustion of war. She placed a hand over his chest and said, "The people of Lysera owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." Ethan tried to sit up, but she stopped him gently. "You fought not as one of us, but for all of us," she said, "and for that, we name you the Guardian of Lysera." The title echoed through the halls, and when the news spread through the city, the people gathered in the streets chanting his name. Children painted human symbols on their arms. Soldiers bowed when he passed for the first time in history. A human was honored among the stars, but Ethan didn't celebrate. He stood on the palace balcony that evening, staring at the sunset painting the sky orange and gold. Sarah joined him quietly, her voice low. "They love you." He smiled faintly. "They don't love me. They love what I showed them, that even the smallest spark can survive the dark." She looked at him, her expression soft. "And what about you? What do you want now?" He was silent for a moment, watching the sky where enemy ships once burned. "I want peace," he said. "For my people, for yours, maybe for the whole galaxy." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then you won't be alone in that." The wind carried her words away, but the promise stayed as the night grew darker. Lights began to rise from the city below, floating lanterns, hundreds of them glowing like stars, each one carried by someone who had survived, someone who remembered the human who fought for them. Sarah and Ethan stood side by side, watching the sky fill with light. She turned to him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were weak," Ethan smiled. "You weren't wrong. I just don't stay weak for long." She laughed quietly. "No, you don't." Behind them, Lyra and Vara approached. Bowing their heads respectfully, Lyra said softly, "The Queen wants to send a message to Earth, an alliance." Then Ethan's eyes widened. "An alliance?" Vara nodded. "You've earned it. Lysera will stand with humanity." For a long moment he didn't speak. He looked at the horizon, at the stars where Earth still waited, forgotten by most, and he whispered, "Then maybe, just maybe, this is where the future begins." Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. "You started something, Ethan Cross. Something that will outlive us both." He turned to her, his voice warm. "Then we make sure it's worth it." As the final lanterns rose into the sky, the wind carried their glow across the clouds. And for the first time in centuries, two worlds, human and alien, shared the same light. The war had scarred them, but from its ashes, a new bond had been born. Ethan looked up, whispering to the stars, "Humanity isn't gone. We're just getting started." And beside him, Sarah smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 hopes. For she knew, the galaxy had doubted humans once, but after Ethan Cross, no one ever would again.